I was 8 years old at the time, and I remember being the smallest in our group. My older brother, Caio, was 11, and his best friend Pedro was the same age. They were always running around, playing rough, and doing things that made me feel left out, so I often tried to tag along, just to be part of their world. That day, like many others, I followed them outside, hoping to join in whatever adventure they had in mind. The sun was beginning to dip, casting long shadows across the yard. It was one of those lazy afternoons where nothing seemed particularly interesting. We'd already run around the garden, kicked a ball back and forth, and even climbed a couple of trees. But soon enough, boredom started to settle in. I could tell Caio and Pedro were getting restless, exchanging glances as if searching for something more exciting to do. Then one of them, I can't remember who, suggested we go explore the woods. The woods. There was a small forest behind our house, and we'd never really gone too deep into it. I had always been told by my parents to stay away from it, that it wasn't safe. But being a kid, I was curious, and the temptation of doing something forbidden gave the idea an irresistible thrill. Besides, I wasn't about to be left behind. So, when Caio and Pedro started walking toward the tree line, I quickly followed, despite the nervous flutter that started to grow in my chest. The trees quickly swallowed us up as we ventured deeper into the forest. I kept looking back over my shoulder, half expecting to see the comforting sight of our house, but it had already disappeared behind the thick foliage. The air seemed cooler under the canopy, and the sounds of the bustling street faded into the background, replaced by the rustling of leaves and the occasional crack of a branch underfoot. My excitement soon gave way to a creeping unease, but I didn't want to be the scared little sister, so I kept quiet, even though a part of me wanted to turn around. The deeper we went, the quieter it became. Even the birds seemed to stop singing, leaving only the sound of our footsteps on the soft ground. Caio and Pedro were up ahead, talking and laughing like it was just another day, while I lagged behind, feeling more and more out of place. It wasn't long before we came across something unexpected. We stumbled upon the old railway tracks. I had heard about these tracks before. They were abandoned and used for years, but still, there was something eerie about them. Rusted and half covered in moss, they stretched out in both directions, disappearing into the woods. Caio's face lit up at the sight of them, and before I could protest, he and Pedro were running down the tracks, their laughter echoing off the trees. I hesitated for a moment, the weight of my parents' warnings pressing down on me. But I couldn't just stand there alone, so I ran after them. As we followed the tracks, something strange began to happen. The deeper we went, the more disoriented I felt. We weren't going in circles, but it felt like we were. Every few minutes, I'd look around, and the trees would seem oddly familiar, as if we'd been there before. I tried to shake off the feeling, convincing myself it was just my imagination, but there was a growing sense of unease that I couldn't ignore. The woods seemed different, darker maybe, more silent, as if they were waiting for something. After what felt like hours, I tugged at Caio's sleeve, trying to tell him we should head back. "We'll be fine," he said, brushing me off. "We're just exploring. Don't be such a baby." Pedro nodded in agreement, though his face seemed to mirror the slight doubt that flickered in Caio's eyes. I didn't argue, but the weight in my stomach told me we were making a mistake. It wasn't long before we found ourselves even deeper in the forest, further than we had ever gone before. The trees were thicker here, the light barely filtering through the leaves. The track stretched on, and we kept following them, though none of us said a word. The thrill of adventure had faded, replaced by a strange tension that none of us dared to acknowledge. We were too far in to turn back now. That's when I heard it. A sound, faint but unmistakable. A soft, distant melody. At first, I thought it was just the wind, but then it grew louder, more distinct. It was music, a flute. The haunting notes floated through the trees, rising and falling with a rhythm that seemed almost deliberate. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. I looked at Caio and Pedro, but they didn't seem to hear it. Or maybe they were pretending not to. Do you hear that? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Caio frowned, listening for a moment before shaking his head. You're just imagining things, he said. But there was an edge to his voice now, a crack in his confidence. I wasn't imagining it. The flute was still playing, and it was getting closer. Something wasn't right. I could feel it. The woods were different here, almost as if they were alive, watching us, waiting. I wanted to leave, to run back the way we came, but the music, it pulled at me. It was as if it wanted us to follow, to go deeper into the forest, away from the safety of the tracks. And then, without thinking, I took a step forward, following the sound. I don't know what came over me, but something about that music felt like it was calling me, like it was meant for me. I started walking toward the sound, my feet moving almost on their own. Caio and Pedro yelled for me to stop, but I couldn't. I was drawn to it. The melody was soothing and haunting at the same time, wrapping itself around my mind, making everything else seem unimportant. My fear, my confusion, it all melted away as I focused on the flute. The track seemed to twist and turn in ways that didn't make sense, almost as if they were shifting under my feet. Caio finally caught up to me, grabbing my arm and pulling me back. What are you doing? You're going to get us lost. His voice cracked, and for the first time that day, I realized he was just as scared as I was, if not more. But I couldn't explain it to him. I couldn't put into words why I felt like I had to follow that music. We're already lost, I whispered. Pedro was looking around nervously. The air felt thicker here, almost suffocating. The trees were pressing in closer, their branches clawing at the sky like they were trying to keep something out. Or maybe keep us in. The light was fading fast, and a cold wind picked up, rustling the leaves in a way that made my skin crawl. And then the music stopped. The sudden silence was deafening. I didn't realize how much I had been relying on that melody until it disappeared. It was like someone had cut a string inside me, and now everything felt wrong. The hairs on the back of my neck stood on end, and for a long moment, none of us moved. We just stood there, staring into the woods, waiting for something to happen. And then it did. From behind us, deep in the forest, came the unmistakable sound of footsteps. Slow, deliberate, crunching on the dry leaves. Someone was out there. Caio grabbed my hand again, his grip tighter this time. We need to go. Now. His voice was barely a whisper, but I could hear the fear in it. Pedro looked pale, his eyes darting around as if expecting something to jump out from the trees at any second. I nodded, but before we could take a step, the flute started again, louder this time, more urgent. It was coming from in front of us now, deeper in the woods. It felt like the music was trying to lead us away from the footsteps behind us. My heart pounded in my chest. I didn't know what was out there, but I knew I didn't want to find out. Without thinking, I broke into a run, dragging Caio and Pedro with me. We ran down the tracks, the music guiding us, even though I had no idea where it was taking us. All I knew was that we had to get away from whatever was behind us. The forest seemed to stretch on forever, the tracks twisting and turning in ways that didn't make sense. I could still hear the footsteps behind us, getting closer. Whoever or whatever was following us, it wasn't slowing down. Faster! Caio shouted, his voice hoarse from the cold air. We sprinted as fast as we could, the music pulling us forward like a beacon. My legs were burning, and my lungs felt like they were about to burst, but I didn't dare stop. The footsteps were right behind us now, so close I could almost feel them. Then, suddenly, the tracks ended. We stumbled to a stop, nearly falling over each other. Ahead of us was a steep embankment, and beyond that, nothing but trees as far as the eye could see. There was nowhere else to go. I turned around, expecting to see whoever had been following us, but there was no one there, just the trees and the silence. The music stopped again. We stood there, panting, trying to catch our breath, but the woods were eerily quiet now. The footsteps were gone. The flute was gone. It was like everything had just disappeared. For a moment, none of us said anything. We were too scared to move, too scared to even breathe. It felt like the forest was watching us, waiting for something. My heart was still racing, and I could feel the cold sweat dripping down my back. Then Caio spoke, his voice trembling. "We're lost." Those words hung in the air, heavy and terrifying. I could see the fear in his eyes, the realization that we were in over our heads. Pedro was shaking, his hands balled into fists, as if he was trying to hold onto something, anything, to make sense of what was happening. I wanted to cry, but I didn't. Not yet. We needed to figure out what to do. We couldn't stay there, out in the open, waiting for whatever was out there to come back. "Let's just keep moving," I said, surprising myself with how calm I sounded. "We can find our way out. We just need to keep going." Caio nodded, though I could tell he wasn't convinced. None of us were, but we didn't have any other choice. So we turned away from the tracks and headed into the trees, hoping that somehow we'd find our way back. But deep down, I had a feeling that we were far from home, and that something was still following us. As we pushed forward into the woods, the trees seemed to close in tighter around us, their branches forming a thick canopy that blocked out most of the remaining light. The shadows grew longer, stretching across the ground like fingers reaching out to grab us. My heart was pounding in my chest, and every sound, the rustling of leaves, the snap of a twig, made me jump. We didn't talk much after that. It felt like the woods were listening, like anything we said would only make it worse. The air was thick with tension, and even though we were walking together, I felt completely alone. Pedro was trailing behind us, his eyes darting nervously from side to side. Caio stayed close to me, his hand gripping my arm tightly. Every now and then, he'd stop and look around, like he was trying to get his bearings. But the truth was, none of us had any idea where we were. Time seemed to stretch out in those woods. I couldn't tell if we had been walking for minutes or hours. It all blurred together, the endless trees, the soft crunch of leaves beneath our feet, the eerie silence that seemed to follow us wherever we went. And then the music came back. This time, it was softer, almost distant, but unmistakable. The same haunting melody, floating through the air like a whisper. My blood ran cold. I froze in place, my eyes scanning the trees for any sign of movement, but there was nothing, just the sound of the flute, calling to us from somewhere deep in the woods. "Did you hear that?" Pedro whispered, his voice trembling. Caio nodded slowly, his face pale. "It's the flute again." I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. We all knew what it meant, that we weren't alone, that whoever, or whatever, was playing that music was still out there, watching us. "What do we do?" Pedro asked, his voice barely audible. For a moment, none of us answered. I wanted to tell him that everything would be okay, that we'd find our way out, but I couldn't. I didn't believe it myself. The truth was, I had no idea what to do. We were lost in the middle of the woods, being followed by something we couldn't see, and the only thing guiding us was that strange, haunting music. "We keep moving," I finally said, my voice steadier than I felt. "We can't stop now." Caio hesitated, but he didn't argue. We started walking again, this time following the sound of the flute, even though we knew it was dangerous. It didn't make any sense, but something about the music felt like our only way out, like it was leading us somewhere, even if we didn't know where. The deeper we went, the darker it got. The trees seemed to close in tighter around us, their branches twisting and gnarled like the arms of some monstrous creature. The air grew colder, and every breath felt like it was freezing in my lungs. I could feel the fear creeping up inside me, threatening to take over, but I pushed it down. We had to keep going. We didn't have a choice. Suddenly, Pedro stopped in his tracks, his eyes wide with terror. "Did you hear that?" We all froze, listening. At first, I didn't hear anything. Just the wind rustling through the leaves, the distant sound of the flute. But then, from somewhere behind us, I heard it. The unmistakable sound of footsteps. Slow, deliberate footsteps, crunching through the leaves. Someone was following us. My heart skipped a beat, and for a moment, I couldn't breathe. I turned to look behind us, but the woods were too thick, too dark. I couldn't see anything. But I knew, we all knew, that something was out there, moving closer with every step. "We have to run," Caio whispered, his voice shaking. But before we could move, the music stopped again, plunging us into an eerie silence. The footsteps grew louder, closer. My skin prickled with fear, and I could feel the hairs on the back of my neck standing on end. Whoever was out there was getting closer, and they weren't trying to hide it. Panic surged through me, and I took a step back, my body trembling. "We need to go. Now." Without waiting for a response, I turned and bolted deeper into the woods. Caio and Pedro followed close behind, their footsteps pounding the ground as we ran. The branches whipped against my face, the cold air stinging my skin, but I didn't care. All I could think about was getting away from whatever was out there. We ran for what felt like an eternity, the sound of the footsteps fading into the distance behind us. My legs burned and my lungs ached, but I didn't stop. I couldn't. Not until I was sure we were safe. Eventually, we came to a clearing, a small patch of open ground surrounded by trees. I collapsed onto the grass, gasping for air, my heart racing. Caio and Pedro fell to the ground beside me. equally out of breath. For a long moment, none of us said anything. We just sat there, trying to catch our breath, our bodies trembling from fear and exhaustion. The clearing was eerily quiet, the only sound the rustling of leaves in the wind. I looked around, scanning the tree line for any sign of movement, but there was nothing. Whoever had been following us was gone. But I knew, deep down, that we weren't safe yet. "We can't stay here," Caio said, his voice shaky. "We have to keep moving." I nodded, but I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. The woods felt alive, like they were closing in around us, trapping us. And somewhere in the back of my mind, I could still hear that haunting melody, faint but persistent, calling to us from the darkness. We were in too deep now. There was no turning back. All we could do was keep moving and hope that, somehow, we'd find a way out. But a part of me knew the truth, that the forest wasn't going to let us go. Not yet. As we sat in that eerie clearing, catching our breath, the tension in the air only grew thicker. The trees around us seemed to stand taller, their twisted branches looming overhead like skeletal hands reaching for the sky. I couldn't shake the feeling that we weren't alone, that something was watching us from the shadows. "Do you think it's gone?" Pedro asked, his voice barely a whisper, as if he was afraid of being heard by whatever was lurking out there. "I don't know," I muttered, my eyes scanning the dark forest. "But we can't stay here." Caio was the first to stand up. His face was pale, but his expression was determined. "We need to keep moving," he said, his voice firmer now. "Staying in one place isn't safe." We all knew he was right. The clearing felt too exposed, too vulnerable. If something was following us, and I was sure something was, it wouldn't take long for it to find us here. I stood up, brushing the dirt and leaves from my clothes, and took one last glance around the clearing before we started walking again. This time we didn't speak. There was no point in trying to make sense of what was happening. The music, the footsteps, the feeling of being followed. It was all too much. We were just kids, lost in the woods, and there was nothing we could do except keep moving forward and hope for the best. The deeper we went, the darker the forest became. The trees grew denser, their branches so thick that barely any light filtered through. Every sound felt amplified, the snap of a twig, the rustling of leaves, the occasional distant hoot of an owl. It all made my heart race, my mind conjuring up images of unseen figures lurking just out of sight. And then the music started again, that haunting, melodic sound that seemed to drift through the trees like a ghostly whisper. My blood ran cold as the familiar tune filled the air, and I stopped dead in my tracks. "It's back," I whispered, my voice barely audible. Pedro and Caio froze beside me, their faces pale with fear. The music was coming from somewhere deeper in the woods, just like before. It played for a few moments, then stopped abruptly, leaving only silence behind. "We have to follow it," I said, surprising even myself with the suggestion. Caio gave me a confused look. "Follow it? Are you crazy? That thing, whatever it is, it's been leading us deeper into the woods. We're going to get even more lost if we follow it." I knew he was right, but something about the music felt like our only option. It was drawing us in, whether we liked it or not. There was a pull to it, a strange compulsion that I couldn't explain. "I don't know," I said, my voice shaky. "But staying here isn't going to help. It feels like the only way out." Pedro nodded hesitantly, but Caio looked unconvinced. He sighed and rubbed his face in frustration before finally giving in. Fine, but if we get even more lost, it's on you. With that, we started walking again, this time following the distant sound of the flute. The melody would play for a few moments, then stop, only to start again a little farther ahead. It was almost as if it was leading us somewhere, guiding us deeper into the heart of the forest. The sense of being watched never left me. With every step we took, I felt like there were eyes on us, hidden in the trees, observing our every move. Occasionally, I'd hear the soft rustle of leaves behind us, like something was creeping just out of sight. But every time I turned around, there was nothing, just the endless, dark woods. We walked for what felt like hours, the music our only guide. The deeper we went, the more disoriented I became. It was like the forest itself was shifting around us, changing shape. No matter how far we walked, it felt like we were going in circles, never getting any closer to finding a way out. And then, without warning, the music stopped. We stood there, frozen in place, listening for any sign of it starting again. But the only sound was the wind rustling through the leaves. "I don't like this," Caio muttered. "It feels like we're being led into a trap." I didn't say anything, but I couldn't shake the feeling that he was right. The music had stopped so abruptly, and now the forest felt more ominous than ever. It was like the air itself had thickened, making it harder to breathe. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw something move. At first, I thought it was just a trick of the light, but then I saw it again, a dark figure, standing among the trees, watching us. My heart leaped into my throat, and I grabbed Caio's arm, pulling him close. "Do you see that?" I whispered, my voice trembling. He followed my gaze, his eyes narrowing as he scanned the trees. "What, where?" "There," I said, pointing toward the figure. But just as I raised my hand, it vanished, disappearing into the shadows. Pedro let out a shaky breath. "We need to go." We all knew he was right. Whatever was out there, it wasn't friendly, and it was getting closer. Without another word, we turned and started running, our footsteps pounding against the forest floor. The trees blurred around us as we sprinted through the underbrush, branches scratching at our arms and faces. But no matter how fast we ran, I couldn't shake the feeling that we weren't getting any farther away, that the forest was closing in on us, trapping us in its dark embrace. And somewhere behind us, just out of sight, I could hear the soft sound of footsteps, the same deliberate, slow footsteps that had been following us all along. We weren't alone in these woods, and whoever, or whatever, was out there wasn't going to let us leave. Not without a fight. Our legs burned from the relentless running, lungs aching as we pushed forward. The dark figure we had seen, or imagined, lingered in my mind, a shadow that refused to leave. No matter how fast we ran, the oppressive atmosphere of the forest clung to us. I could still hear it, those slow, steady footsteps in the distance, keeping pace with us, never too far behind. We came to a stop at the edge of a small ravine, our path blocked by a sharp drop. The forest had seemingly trapped us, with no clear way out. I glanced at Caio, who was frantically looking around for another route, and at Pedro, whose face was pale with fear. What do we do now?" Pedro stammered, his voice barely audible over the pounding of our hearts. Caio shook his head, frustrated. "I don't know. We need to find another way around." But the woods had other plans. As we stood there, I felt a sudden shift in the air. It was subtle at first, a breeze that carried with it a faint, familiar sound. The flute. My body tensed. The melody, distant but unmistakable, echoed through the trees. It was as if the forest itself was alive, and it was playing that eerie tune to draw us deeper into its clutches. "Not again," I whispered, more to myself than to them. But Caio and Pedro heard it too. Their heads snapped toward the direction of the sound, and I could see the same fear reflected in their eyes. This time, the music was different. It wasn't just a passive melody guiding us. It felt sinister, like it was daring us to follow it. "I'm not going," Pedro said, stepping back. "We can't keep following it. This is wrong." Caio nodded, but before he could respond, the footsteps started again. Louder this time, closer. Whatever was following us had caught up. A shiver ran down my spine as I turned to face the trees behind us. For a moment, I thought I saw movement in the shadows, something tall and unnatural, standing just out of sight. My breath caught in my throat, and I could feel the cold grip of fear tightening around my chest. "We need to move," I whispered, urgency flooding my voice. But there was nowhere to go. The ravine blocked our path forward, and the forest behind us felt like a wall of darkness, hiding something dangerous that was inching ever closer. The music grew louder, and so did the footsteps. Then, without warning, Pedro screamed. I spun around to see him clutching his arm, eyes wide with terror as if something had grabbed him. But there was nothing there, no hand, no figure, just empty air. Yet, the way he recoiled, it was as if something invisible had reached out from the darkness and touched him. "Get off! Get it off!" he cried, stumbling backward. Caio rushed over to help, but before he could reach Pedro, the boy was pulled to the ground as if by an unseen force. His body hit the earth hard, his screams echoing through the trees. "Pedro!" I shouted, running toward him, but Caio grabbed my arm, holding me back. "Don't! We don't know what it is," he yelled, his voice shaking with fear. Pedro's screams turned to gasps, and his body convulsed on the ground as if something was holding him down. I could only watch in horror, powerless to help. And then, as suddenly as it had started, it stopped. Pedro lay still, breathing heavily, his face pale and covered in dirt. Caio and I hesitated, unsure of what had just happened. After a moment, Pedro slowly sat up, his hands trembling. His eyes darted around wildly, as if searching for the thing that had attacked him. It's gone," he whispered, but his voice was hollow, like he didn't even believe it himself. The forest had gone silent again. The flute had stopped playing, and the footsteps were no longer audible. But the sense of dread that hung over us remained. "We can't stay here," Caio said, his voice barely above a whisper. "We need to find a way out. Now." I nodded, my mind racing. I didn't understand what was happening. None of us did. But I knew one thing for sure. We were in danger, and the forest was playing games with us. Caio helped Pedro to his feet, and we started moving again, this time keeping close together. The ravine blocked our path, but there was a narrow trail that led along the edge. It wasn't ideal, but it was our only option. We walked in silence, every sound in the forest sending a jolt of fear through me. I kept looking over my shoulder, half expecting to see the figure in the trees again, or hear the music start up once more. But the forest remained eerily quiet, as if it was waiting for something. The trail wound its way through the dense woods, and after what felt like an eternity, we finally emerged from the trees. The sight of open land ahead of us brought a brief moment of relief, but it didn't last long. Standing at the edge of the clearing was a small, old building, an abandoned shack, barely standing, with its wooden walls rotting and its windows shattered. It looked like it hadn't been touched in years. "We should check it out," Caio said, though he didn't sound confident. Pedro, still shaken, shook his head. "No way. We're not going in there." But something about the shack drew me in. Maybe it was the exhaustion, or the need for shelter, or maybe it was the fact that we had nowhere else to go. I didn't know what was waiting for us inside, but I had a feeling that it was our only chance. "We have to," I said, my voice barely steady. "There's nowhere else to go." Caio and Pedro exchanged nervous glances, but they didn't argue. Together, we approached the shack, the creaking of its old wooden door echoing as we pushed it open. The air inside was stale and thick with dust. The small room was empty, save for a few pieces of broken furniture and a cracked mirror hanging on the wall. But the moment we stepped inside, I felt it. That same presence, that same unseen force that had been following us. We weren't alone in that shack, and whatever was there, it wasn't human. If you enjoyed this chilling story, don't forget to subscribe to Beyond Fear and hit the bell icon so you won't miss any of our upcoming videos. Here, you'll find more real stories filled with mystery, psychological horror, and the supernatural every week. Before you go, make sure to check out the 2 videos that just popped up in the end screen. I promise, they'll leave you with goosebumps. See you next time, if you dare.